Well, thank you. Hello, everyone. I guess it's afternoon. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be back on this program again. I hope I get it off to a good start to this new series. Uh, Lena didn't mention, but I'm also an advisor to Gun and a big fan of Taylor Ricketts and the Gun program. So it's a special program, special honor for me to be here with you this afternoon. Well, I've written this book called They Knew. It's a useful book, I think, because it recounts the history of what the federal government did and did not do over a period of almost 50 years. And it's a sad story, but I think it's a story that needs to be told and needs to be part of the record. I say in the book that history reflects the greatest dereliction of civic responsibility in the history of the Republic. I hope I wasn't getting too hyperbolic there, but I do believe that it is a huge default on responsibility. So it tells the story of what the federal government knew and what it did during that 50-year period. And I got into this because I was asked by a group called Our Children's Trust out in Oregon to write up the Carter administration for the Juliana lawsuit, the children's climate lawsuit that they were the lawyers for. And so I brought up the Carter administration because they knew the Carter administration was a pivotal moment in this history and that I was part of that administration. And they liked it so much, they said, well, now, Gus, why don't you do all the other administrations? Our first reaction was, well, I didn't bargain for that. But then again, I did it. And this book is basically an update and a revision of that work, including the Trump administration. And MIT Press has published it, and I want to thank them and Our Children's Trust for their support here. It couldn't have really been done without the tremendous documentary research that the staff of Our Children's Trust did and made available to me. You can like or not like what I say, but it's hard to doubt it because there are over 500 footnotes in it and over 200 exhibits, and all of this material is online for those who want to consult it at Our Children's Trust. So a huge documentary trove has been put online to go along a companion to the book. So what are some of the big findings, so to speak, if we look back over this whole period? Well, first was that the knowledge of the seriousness and the threat of the climate issue go back before the Carter administration and has been consistent throughout this period. Every administration has been warned by scientists, policy leaders, and others that this was a serious issue going back for almost 50 years now. And the science has been remarkably consistent. This has not been a story of having to change the science or flip-flops or false predictions. If you look at what Roger Revelle and others said back in the Johnson administration, is very much what is happening today. So I think the other thing is that those administrations and their corresponding Congresses were also informed extensively about alternatives to continued reliance on fossil fuels. And Carter took a lot of steps in those directions. And in that administration and others, the book does report on the tremendous information and activity that has been available to each administration to adopt a different course. And the bottom line is that that's exactly what didn't happen. Every administration, even those that tried to do something about the climate issue, continued an extraordinary level of support for fossil fuels. And even Obama, who did the most probably of all those administrations, was proud at the end of his 8 years to brag really about the work that they had done to promote fracking, U.S. fossil fuel exports and development. And as a result of this, the percentage of U.S. energy use that is fossil from Carter to Trump went from about 90%, but only down to about 80%. And in the sense energy use was going up during that period, including fossil fuel use, our emissions actually went up over that time rather than down. So they knew the seriousness of what they were doing, and they did it anyhow. I think the only conclusion that I can draw from this really is that this was a gigantic long-term failure of our system of political economy. And that's something I want to come back to at the end. There was a bit of a cyclical pattern. The Democratic administrations, Carter, Clinton, Obama, took this problem somewhat seriously, tried to do something about it, as Biden is now doing also. But every one of those administrations they didn't do much, but they tried to do something. And every one of those administrations was followed by a flamethrower administration, which sought, among other things, to undo what the previous administration had done. So we have a pattern here that could, I fear, be repeated in the years ahead. It also turns out, I think, as a major lesson that an abundance of good science repeated endlessly is not enough. An abundance of what I would say call comfortable advocacy, things like what I've done for decades, and environmental groups have done for decades. Comfortable advocacy promoting climate action is not enough. And we would be foolish to think that continuing to do the things that we did for the past few decades on the climate issue are going to produce a different result. And indeed, we can see that playing out every day now as we look at the whittling away of Biden's ambitious climate goals in the practical cauldron of our deplorable politics. Neither party is particularly trustworthy on this, and the Republicans have now become downright hostile to the whole thing. So from this, I conclude that something new and different is now required. And I want to come back to that. We can ask what accounts for this failure. The climate issue is complicated. It's not like the ozone depletion issue, which itself is more complicated than a lot of other more visible issues. But climate is superbly complicated with many different gases and consequences and things that can and can't be done, and what's really effective, and so on. And we really have been dependent on fossil fuels. And when the oil executives showed up in Congress a couple of months ago, they just made the case, oh, we can't turn off all the fossil fuels. Well, nobody's proposing to turn off all the fossil fuels overnight, as they were claiming. But they scare people with energy shortages and gas lines and other things. And then there's a tremendous cloud of the fossil fuel industry, which is, among other things, run a massive disinformation campaign, well reported in Naomi Oreskes' book about sowing the seeds of climate doubt and how effective that's been using the tobacco model. And then I think another factor at play here is that this has been a period which we tried to move forward, in which has been a growing hostility to government action generally, to government regulation in particular, to science, to elites, and other things that have warred against effective action. On the more positive side, I think we have finally turned a corner. How far we'll go around that corner is very unclear, but the climate devastation has now reached a point that it can no longer be ignored. It's fueled a new salience of climate in our political process, and that we have a lot of political champions urging climate action today. And we now have had, pushing that climate action, a rebirth of activism on the subject coming from youth, indigenous peoples, and marginal frontline communities that are most seriously affected. So all this is happening. It's a swirl we're now in the middle of. But I want to really come to the point about what we need to think about. What are the lessons from all this as we look to the future, and what we need to do now? I've mentioned that we need to move beyond past approaches, that good science and comfortable advocacy are not enough. So what do we do? Well, it seems to me that one thing we need is a massive outpouring of civic advocacy, civic protest, civic mobilization, nonviolent civil disobedience. The media needs to turn vastly more attention to this subject. They finally are linking climate disasters to climate after decades of ignoring the link. We've seen a good film, Don't Look Up, calling attention to ignorance and inaction. And there are other things that need to do, but mostly what I'm really talking about is a new level, a new outpouring of civic protest and demand. It can be in the form of consumer action, which we need new tools for concerted consumer action, new tools for concerted investor action. And we need to take a page from Sunrise, from the Extinction Rebellion, and the other hard-nosed advocacy groups out there today, bringing new life to the issue. Secondly, we need to move into electoral politics. Environmentalists have been terrible about getting into electoral politics, in part because of the 501c3 limitations, but we need to get out of those limitations and get busy getting candidates elected who are going to do this job, and campaigning like hell against those who are in the way of doing this job. And environmentalists needs to become a powerful political force, which it's not now. Thirdly, we need to invoke the courts. We've seen defaults from Congress, defaults from the executive branch, well, let's give the courts a chance to rise to the occasion, as they have done in Europe and other places around the world. We're seeing a new level of judicial activism on the climate issue. We need that in the US. And one of the things that this Juliana case that I've been associated with represents is an effort to get a constitutional ruling on this, so that when an administration does change and tries to go backwards, the Constitution will provide some guardrails that will prevent us from going off the track. And we need a constitutional protection of the climate. And that's one of the things that this Juliana lawsuit is seeking to pursue with the courts. So those are basic things for immediate action. There's also another area, another lesson, big lesson, I think, for us, and it comes most vividly forward when we think about Glasgow and what happened there at COP26. A disaster, I would say, happened there in the sense that we had an opportunity yet again for the 26th time to do something meaningful at the international level, and we didn't do it. We took some baby steps. And the problem, I think, and I've written about a whole book about this, is that the machinery of global environmental governance, of treaties and conventions and protocols and the participation therein is badly flawed. And we need to stand back and engage in a process of fundamental change and fundamental reform in the process of global environmental governance and multilateral environmental agreement. But this leaves me with what I think of as the really big issue that comes out of this. I can't look back over this 50 years that I've written about and conclude anything but that this political economy that we live and work in has failed hugely on this issue. We had many opportunities for our system of politics and governance and economy to address this issue meaningfully, and at essentially every turn it defaulted. So it seems to me very important that in addition to all the things that I've mentioned earlier that we should be doing, we need to take a step back and engage with this budding momentum, I would say, for deep system change, for transformative change in our economy and in our polity. And I don't think we can expect a system that is geared at its core to growth, to corporate profit, to corporate facilitating and supporting bastions of corporate power, for allowing that power to overrun our democracy, judging that growth and progress through GDP, a totally flawed analysis of where things are and where things are going. Our runaway consumerism, misguided values that no longer make sense, even if they did once, and social customs and habits of thought. This whole array of, this is the system, this is the citadel of power that we are up against, magnified by tremendous disparities and injustices in the society itself, which paralyze change, scare people. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, if you have no retirement resources to speak of, if you're borderline into poverty or in it, this is not a world in which you can think and support actions dealing with the climate issue unless you are remarkably sophisticated and happen to be into the issue, which fortunately more and more people are. But it's a slug, and it's a slog, and it's it's a very difficult thing to do if you have so little to back up the day-to-day life and your health and your family and your educational needs and other things that people are consumed with, rightly so. So all of these things combine to create that they are the priorities of our current system and the inevitable results of our current system. And it's just not going to give us the kind of climate action that we need for the long haul. In the short run, we've got to walk on two legs. We've got to get done the things we can get done with the current system, but we also need to be working on transformative change. And of course, I'm preaching this because I guess partly I've written books about it, and I think they're pretty clear what directions we need to go to build a polity and an economy that can sustain people and place and planet. And we need to put a lot more muscle and energy into that process. So in the end, I hope the book will inform, will be a source material for what happened over that 50 years and how we got into this terrible mess that we're in. I hope the young people will find it useful. And I hope the documentation that's been made available will be useful. I hope it will motivate a new level of uncomfortable activism and supply and help supply the outrage that's needed, not resignation in the face of this default, but outrage about what has happened, what my generation has left the younger generation with, and a deep commitment to change it before it's too late. And I hope it will help open the door to the courts, and that the judicial branch will rise to the occasion and will end up at some point with a constitutional protection of the climate as a fundamental right. And I hope, as I said, the biggest thing to me is that I hope it will fuel a new interest in deep transformative change of our political economy. So that's what I got out of the book, and it was a great pleasure to write it and to share it, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.